Okay, so we are now going to complete the final set of virtual machines, our Web Application Proxy servers, and we're going to use JSON templates to deploy these VMs. So what I wanted to really do in this series is show the multiple ways we can deploy VMs, and JSON templates are basically a infrastructure as code method of deploying VMs. So in this video, we've already completed this deployment. We've completed our deployment of our ADFS servers. Now we're going to focus on deploying our two VMs for our web application proxy servers, both of which will be in the DMZ. We're also going to deploy the connectivity to our load balancer as we did with our ADFS servers. So let's go ahead and move forward with this. What I did in advance is I went ahead and deployed the ADFS Web Application Proxy availability set, because we've done that several times, so that we could just move directly into deploying our virtual machine. So we can see that there's nothing there except the availability set itself. So the first thing I want to show you as part of this, since we're going to use JSON format, is what a JSON file looks like. Basically, what we're doing here, our goal here is to define an infrastructure and then submit that infrastructure to Azure via a JSON format file, and basically Azure takes that information and makes it happen. So basically defining everything in advance, submitting it to Azure, and then waiting for that deployment to complete. So this is a very simple text-based file. I opened it here in Notepad so you can see that it's relatively small. It may look a little bit daunting, but most of this you can get from GitHub and from templates that exist out in the wild, and you just piece together what you want. What I typically do is I piece it together either this way, or I download it directly from a GitHub template that already exists, and then I open it up in Visual Studio, which I have here. And this is that exact same file. However, it basically gives us some ways to look at it and see specific things. Now, a JSON file basically has three types of objects. It has parameters, it has variables, and it has resources. The resources are actually what you create. And you create these resources by information that is provided with parameters and variables. So for example, in my parameters here, I have a VM name. And you can see that the VM name is of type string and with a metadata description of what this is for. Now, I didn't provide any values here, so when I run this JSON template, it's actually going to ask me for a VM name. If I look at VM size, same story. However, now I have a default value. So if I don't provide a value, it won't ask for a value. It's going to use our standard DS2 v2 size in Azure. And as we move along here, this one, it doesn't provide any default values, so I'm going to provide that when I run the template. And the same for this one. And then you also have the ability to provide allowed values when you have a default value. So the allowed values basically reduce the capabilities of the template to what you want. In this case, for the Windows OS version, I have a default value, so it won't ask me for a value, but I could also provide a value of those other three options there. So that's what parameters look like. Variables basically take parameters and do things with them, or take information about the deployment and modify it in some way. So a perfect example is location. When I deploy this template using PowerShell, a PowerShell command, I'm going to specify a resource group. And location is basically calculating resource group based on the location that I am submitting as part of my PowerShell script. So, and any other references to location in my actual resources, it will know to deploy it in the same location as where the PowerShell command is being issued to deploy. The OS disk name is being calculated. It's using the parameter coming in from up here. So for disk name, so you can see it says use the parameter VM name and then add -os disk to the end of it. So very much like what we did before with our storage or our disk configuration with our PowerShell script. Same thing's happening here with the NIC. So I'm basically saying use the NIC name that is provided and concatenate vnic in front of it and put subnet name at the end. So it's using a parameter of subnet. And if I look up here at subnet, my parameter for subnet name, I actually provided that in advance. So you can see that is DMZ is the default value. And then finally, our resources. So our resources are actually what are being created. I'm creating a VNIC with this template, and you can see when I click on the VNIC, it actually highlights the code that's related to it. And so you can see here the type of object. It's going to be a network interface. It's going to have the name, nickname, which was provided in the variables section. And that was that concatenation of VNIC and then the subnet that it's going into. And then finally, we're also creating a VM. And a VM has a number of things. We can specify a computer name here. We can specify usernames and passwords, all sorts of control here. We can also specify diagnostics. So in this case, we're going to enable diagnostics, and we're going to put it in our EDU diagnostics storage account. And you can see here it's using a parameter to get that. But we know that we can't have diagnostics go into a premium storage account, so we have to put it into a standard storage account. That's what that parameter does. Okay, so how do I actually take advantage of this template? Now, the cool thing about these templates is you can deploy entire infrastructures. So what I'll probably do is put together an entire JSON template for the entire ADFS deployment, and you could literally submit that deployment request and it will build out your entire infrastructure. You basically just deploy, wait for an amount of time, and come back and everything's created for you. So the way I actually complete the deployment, however, is with PowerShell. And it's a very simple PowerShell script. Here I'm basically logging into Azure, which I've already done. And then I select a subscription. The next step here is to run a couple of lines of code. So I'm setting my resource group name and my new Azure RM resource group deployment with name ADFS WAP server. Now that name is just it doesn't really relate to anything except this job. My resource group name is resource group, and my template that I'm using, which is the JSON file we just looked at, is right here. That's all there is to this. So I'm going to go ahead and submit this job, and we'll come back when it's complete. Oh, actually, I need to provide some parameters that we talked about. So what is my VM name going to be? I'm going to name this one EDU WAP 01. What is my administrator name? I'm going to use what I've used before, and I'm going to provide a password. And it's going to take that information, it's going to use the default values that were defined in the other areas, and it's going to build out this template. So when that's finished, we'll come right back. Okay, so this deployment has completed. We can see here that after I entered my parameters that within a little bit of time we got this output. And so the output says the provisioning state was succeeded, and it provides a little bit of details about the choices. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to run this again. I'm going to run it for my other ADFS server, WAP server. And the reason I'm doing this is because I didn't do anything to this template except change the storage account to the ADFS EDU02 storage account. And that's what makes these templates really nice, is because all you have to do is make a few changes to the template and rerun it again to get something entirely different. So it's really interesting in that way. Okay, so I'm going to let this run as well, and when we come back, this will be completed, and we'll move on with setting up our load balancer and reviewing our entire configuration. Okay, we're back here, and we can see that the second VM has also been deployed, and with the difference of it is going to this ADFS EDU02 storage account. So let's move back to the portal and let's take a look at what we have overall. So now we can see here an entire set of the VMs required for this deployment. Our new ones are here, EDU WAP 01, EDU WAP 02. We can also see that the associated NIC cards were created, and that we can tell just by looking right away that they're in the DMZ because of the variable names we used. The one final thing we have to do here, well, let's look at our availability set as well, just to make sure that everything is there as we expect. So yes, we have our unique fault and update domains for each of these virtual machines. And then the final thing we're going to do here is we're going to update the external load balancer. We're going to do this in the same way that we updated the internal load balancer. So I'm not going to demo this in the video, but I'm going to use the exact same process. And when we come back, we will have completed everything for our entire deployment. So let's just take a look at that. So just a quick review here. Our deployment is the EDU VNets, the subnets for those, the network security groups for each. Then we deployed our availability sets, all of them. We deployed all of our VMs. We deployed our load balancers.